And welcome to the Stick to Live Hockey Podcast. Stick to Hockey Live Podcast. It's Jason Myrtetus, presented by Parx Sportsbook. Make sure you download the Parx Sportsbook app on your iPhone or your Android and check out all the great features, in-game betting. We'll have some plays later in this episode. I might give out a first to score and a goal scorer again since I nailed Cam Atkinson the other day. I didn't think he was going to score 3 times, but I did have him scoring. So triple your pleasure. And we'll see what the players are tonight. Some plays we'll give out later in the episode. And new customers, if you sign up now, you're going to get that $500 risk-free bet. So make sure you sign up. It's easy to use. I can put plays in while I'm sitting here doing the show. That's how easy it is. And make sure you follow Parx Sportsbook on Twitter at Parx Sportsbook. Follow them on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and get great content, daily specials, all kinds of stuff on there as well, and check out the live in-game betting and play-by-play betting as well. So great stuff on Parx. And we've got a fun episode today because it's actually a fun time to be a hockey fan in Philadelphia again after winning 3 straight after losing, going winless in 10 straight and losing the last 6 in regulation. And we're going to talk about a lot of the different elements of why the team has won the last 3 games. Is it sustainable? What do they need to get better at? And a ton more with our guest on this episode. And I'm happy to bring him in right now from The Athletic and Broad Street Hockey, BSH Radio. It is Charlie O'Connor. He is our guest of honor on this episode of Stick to Hockey Live. Charlie, what's going on?
Hey, how's it going, Jason? Thanks for having me.
Man, I'm excited to talk to you because there's so many elements of this team that are interesting again right now. And we're going to talk about, Vancouver as kind of another part of this, but we'll get to that. But let's start here because Morgan Frost went into COVID protocol in the last game, and I know you've been doing some reporting on this. He obviously was pulled from the game after, I believe, 2 shifts and about a minute and 15 of ice time. The team did go to Montreal, but I got to look at this and go, there's a little risk here because if a player tests positive there, they may get trapped over the border for a period of time.
Yeah, it's a real concern. It's tough because, it's not like the Flyers can just not go. This is on their schedule and, they can't do a voluntary shutdown just because of one player. So all you can really do as the Flyers is kind of just cross your fingers and hope that, this, you can't really call it an outbreak because it appears to just be Morgan Frost at the moment. But Morgan Frost was around his teammates, at practice, in the locker room before the game, on the bench for those few minutes before he was pulled. So you have to worry that, even though all these players are vaccinated, and I did report that my understanding is over 50% of the players on the team have the booster as well. So there is protection there. It's certainly possible that someone could be exposed to, a positive COVID-19 person and not actually, contract the virus. So, Flyers are certainly hoping that's the case. You just don't know. And you just kind of have to wait and see. So, they're over in Montreal now. They made the trip. My understanding is that, and I'm not quite sure where the COVID protocols on the NHL level stand, because they were talking yesterday about turning to a daily testing model. What they had been doing all year is testing every 3 days, every 72 hours. I believe they're moving to a daily testing model. I'm just not sure if that's officially happened yet. I don't know if the NHL and NHLPA have kind of, crossed all the T's, dotted all the I's with the new protocols they're applying. But I know that at least a few of the players are going to be taking, a PCR test, or already took a PCR test this morning. Probably players that were, in relatively close contact with Morgan Frost, because the next regularly scheduled test is actually supposed to be in Philly, back or in Voorhees on Friday when they get back from the trip. So is it possible that at, 6 p.m., 7 p.m. tonight, that another player that they tested will come up positive and they'll have to be pulled from the game? Yeah, it's possible. And that's the concern. So I think everyone in Flyers world is just kind of, holding their breath, crossing their fingers, and hoping that this is just, a one-off and they'll get through it. But no one really knows until we see what happens over the next few days.
Oddly enough, let's just be really honest here. The chance of it being a one-off doesn't seem good.
Yeah.
Like, you see what's going on in Calgary. They added 7 more between players and staffers today. And this Omicron variant is present in the NHL, because I know Free just reported that some of the teams are dealing with this, and it's obviously more transmissible But I mean, the likelihood that this is just one player to me seems incredibly low, considering what we're seeing, not just in the NHL, but in all of sports.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. There have been some instances in the NHL where a couple guys get it this season and then it doesn't spread further. But as you said, the new variant definitely plays a role. No idea if that's what if that's what Morgan Frost was tested positive for. Really, the Flyers haven't even announced if he's officially tested positive, but I believe that's more about privacy regulations than anything else.
Yeah.
You can assume based on the circumstantial evidence that he probably tested positive. So we'll see what happens. The Flyers obviously dealt with such bad luck last year with their COVID outbreak. You would hope that maybe they get a little bit lucky this time. This is obviously the first real incident they've had this year. I know Patrick Brown was out for a while, but he actually contracted that when he was in Vegas. So that wasn't even a Flyers thing. That was more just like they claimed the player and he happened to show up and test positive.
Yeah.
This is the first time where it's really hitting the team. And, it would be a real bummer if it, not just because obviously you don't want to see any of the players get sick, but because, as you noted, after a really, really rough go, it looks like the Flyers are making some, legitimate progress in terms of the quality of their play. How much progress remains to be seen, but it would be a real bummer if we can't see, kind of the end of that, whether this is actual progress, whether this is more of a smokescreen driven by, relatively weak opponents, or if they're actually starting to click under, interim head coach Mike Yeo. And if a bunch of guys get COVID, then you don't even really know, because then you're dealing with what like Carolina's dealing with right now, where they don't even really have most of their team playing.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, this team needs not only to play well, get points in the standings, but they need to get their game in order. And you'd hate to see them postponed right now because, for what you said, obviously, like, you don't want to see players get sick and it's spread and all of that, and to staffers and the like. But when you have New Jersey, Montreal, and Ottawa on your schedule, you want to play those games for a team that I think there's still probably a little bit of fragility there to get that repetition and get their game in order. This is one of those spots in the schedule. Like, I liken this spot like as the polar opposite to a stretch they had in the middle of the 10-game winless streak where they saw Tampa, Florida, Carolina in 3 successive games. Then you have these games, New Jersey, Montreal, and Ottawa, and their combined record was 24, 47, and 9 heading into this week. 80 games total for a whopping 57 standings points. Like, this is an opportunity for them to get points and accomplish the other thing of getting their game in order, isn't it?
Oh, to be sure. And I think, that was a point I made in my column after the Devils game, is that, I'm not quite sure, how fixed the Flyers are. I don't think we're going to know that really, assuming that the COVID, scare doesn't go further than Morgan Frost. I don't think we're going to really know that until next week when they play Washington and Pittsburgh. That's when we'll get a better understanding of just how far they've come. But they've clearly made progress, just because last week they played the Devils and the Devils made them look like they were barely an NHL team. And then this week they play against the same team and they just torched them. It wasn't a competitive game. So clearly there's progress being made. And it's always nice when there's, an easy comparison to be made because you play the same team twice in a week, because clearly the Flyers team that showed up in Newark last Wednesday was not ready to play a hockey game. It was a busy week. Their offense was non-existent. They couldn't complete even like a simple pass. And then against the Devils this week, they look like an entirely different team. So they're clearly improving. It's just a matter of how much are they improving, and have they merely put themselves in the position where, okay, they're better than the bad teams, but that doesn't mean they're actually a good team. So this week would have been big to continue to prove that they're better than the not good teams like the Devils, who have been struggling mightily, the Canadians, who've been a disaster all year, and Ottawa, who's had a couple impressive wins over the last week or so, but talent-wise, they're not there. I mean, they're not a contender. And you roll through these teams, and then you put yourself in a position where you go against Washington and Pittsburgh, and if you make some noise against them, people have to stand up and take notice and say that these guys, maybe they're not the team that was buried in the standings because of a 10-game losing streak. Maybe they're different.
Charlie, one of the things that's hard to wrap our heads around is that we're about 25% through the season, a little bit more than that at this point. But it's amazing. They've had a 10-game winless streak. That was the first time they lost back-to-back games this year. Yet they've beaten Boston this year. They've beaten Calgary. They got beaten by Calgary, too. They beat Washington on the road. They beat Edmonton. They beat Carolina. Like this, it almost doesn't make sense that they've beaten so many good teams but still had a 10-game winless streak. And I know the schedule was relentless in that 10 games with opponents, and just other than the New Jersey Devils, everybody was a good team. But how do you kind of wrap your head around the fact that they do have a lot of quality wins on the schedule, but they're still a team that's way behind in the standings now?
Yeah, I think in that 10-game winless streak, I think things just spiraled. You get caught in that. And I think there was also an element of, there had been tension with regards to the players and the coaching staff dating back to last year. And that's kind of when it all came to a head. Like, I don't think they were, there was fights or anything. I just think that it got to the point where the players were tuning out the head coach and the message that he was trying to get across. And that happens in the NHL. There's a reason why coaching turnover happens so often in this league. Coaches don't last long. Their messages grow stale. And I think what happened in that 10-game winless streak was a combination of a relentless schedule and the players kind of losing faith in the coaching staff. So it was kind of a perfect storm, where maybe if you're playing a good team, a bad team, a good team, a bad team, you're going to struggle, but you're probably going to be able to squeeze some wins out of it. I mean, they could have won that Devils game in the middle of that 10-game winless streak, even though, they didn't play that well. The Devils are a weak enough team that they could have won and had a couple bounces went their way. They just happened to be falling apart structurally at the same time as they were playing against good teams every night. And the result was a 10-game winless streak. So that's kind of where I would put it. Like, I do think the Flyers have talent. Now, whether they're talented enough to be a true contender, I'm not sure. And obviously injuries have hurt them a lot this year. There have been guys like Ryan Ellis who have barely played, Kevin Hayes, who, missed a lot of time, is back, but clearly isn't at 100%. So they're not really playing at full strength. And that's probably part of it. But I do think they have the foundation to be at least a solid team. And that's probably why they were able to win the games that they did against the quality teams that they did. But there were clearly major structural issues that came to a head during that 10-game winless streak. And now it's just a matter of how quickly they can fix them.
Yeah, I looked at it as a confluence of several things. It was their game and lack of confidence in it, the injuries, the schedule, and the league's too unforgiving. When you have all of those things against you, you're not going to win. I mean, you shouldn't have lost 10 games in a row. Jersey lost 8 of 10. But the only team they beat were the Flyers.
Yep.
Those two again, you're going, what are you kidding me? Like, that team's a mess. And they found a way to beat the Flyers twice. It just shows you how bad it is. Let me ask you this question, because I get asked it a lot. And people say, why do NHL teams turn over coaches so quickly? It's about every 3 years that you turn it over. I have some theories on it based on youth hockey, because every 2 years, as you level up from squirt to peewee to bantam to midget, you get a new voice, basically.
That's an interesting theory.
It's just a theory I have. I don't know that there's any fact behind it or not. But, you look at it, and somebody asked me, I was on TSN 1290 in Edmonton. The guy asked me, why do they keep firing coaches? And I said, well, because it works. I mean, it works in the NHL. There's so many examples you can point to. And look at Vancouver now, right? And you go back to Laviolette, and there's so many instances throughout, not just in Philadelphia, but around the NHL. It works, changing the voice and changing. It's not just changing the messenger, it's also changing the message. And what's kind of your theory on why this seems to be such a good model for success? Go back to Bilesma and Sullivan. And I mean, all over the league, you see it.
Yeah, it's a fascinating question. I've never thought about that theory about, the fact that players change coaches so often coming up through the ranks that maybe they're just used to the idea of having a new message every couple of years. That's intriguing. And there really might be something to that. For me, it's a combination of a few things. Number one, I do think part of it probably is just truthfully how good coaches are around the league, in the sense that, a new guy comes in, he implements his system. It works for a while. Then other teams figure out how to attack that system that coach runs with that team. Then it stops working as well. And then over time, the players might lose faith because what they were doing before that was working isn't working as well. And then you have to make a coaching change and you have to do something different. And then it takes the rest of the league another 2 to 3 years to adapt to what that team is newly doing. So I think that might be part of it. Part of it too might just honestly come down to, and I don't think it's an intentional thing on the part of the players, but because it's so accepted these days that coaches get changed every 3 to 4 years, that when things start to go bad, that players start to expect it too. Yeah. And once as a player, you're expecting that shoe to drop, it's over. Like,
Yeah.
it's going to be nearly impossible for a coach to regain the room once he's lost it. And I think, if we lived in an era where it was just expected that, well, coaches don't get fired, coaches have a 10-year shelf life, there wouldn't be any other choice for players but to just kind of grit and bear it and just be like, well, I guess we're just going to have to learn to deal with the fact that he ain't going anywhere. There's an understanding, an implicit understanding, I think, in locker rooms that they know that coaching changes are going to be made if things go bad. And because of that knowledge, I don't think it's, I don't think they're intentionally, blowing off a coach, but there's probably an implicit knowledge in players' minds that, hey, if we are really poor for a month or two, then the coach might get fired and then we might get a new voice. So, you kind of implicitly know that's coming. And maybe that does, in a way, impact your willingness to listen to a message that you're already starting to lose faith in.
Compounded with the fact that whatever the system is not working. And like I've said this on a couple of occasions recently, because system, we call it system, that's like a cute catchphrase. Sure. But for a coach, it's religion. You know what I mean? It's not, it's the way they do things. I always kind of parallel it with Larry Brown when he coached the Sixers. I need the team to play the right way. Well, his right way was his religion, and that's what he's not going to change, because he's had success everywhere he's gone with his religion and what he believes, the core values of how to attack a team. But you and I talked about this in the press box. The team didn't have the right pieces to play the religion, if you will, to use the term again, that Alain Vigneault was preaching.
Yeah, I think that was a big part of it. And the thing with Vigneault's tactics is, as you said, we talk about systems as kind of like a catch-all. The hard truth is that, hockey systems at their core aren't that complex. There's only so many forechecks you can use. There's only so many neutral zone structures you can use. But the distinctions between coaches, it's more about what you emphasize. It's the little things. It's the philosophies behind the systems, whether it's aggressive, whether it's passive, whether you're chasing down a loose puck in the situation, or if you chase down that loose puck and you don't win it, the coach is going to chew you out. So you know that, okay, that's a play I don't make because I'm not going to be rewarded if I make it, and if I don't make it, I'm going to get killed for it. Like that's more the distinctions between systems. And I think with Vigneault's system, it's one of those, and when I say system, again, I'm talking about his general philosophy. You need a lot of things for it to work, and you need full buy-in.
And there's risk.
Yeah, there's risk. You need defensemen that can make passes under pressure. You need speed. You need commitment to a relentless forecheck and a relentless attacking mentality. You need, forwards who have the instincts and the knowledge to know when to blast the zone early to try to catch a team in transition, and when it's a bad idea because you're going to get killed if there's a turnover. Yeah. And that system, that philosophy, it was working in the second half of 2019-2020. So it's not like it's not like Vigneault's system is just fundamentally flawed. It can
or outdated.
Right? Yeah, it can work. It has worked. It just wasn't working anymore for this team. And some of that is personnel. If you don't have strength down the middle, it's a lot harder to play, a good transition game. Some of that was the defense. There's a reason why Chuck Fletcher has mentioned on multiple occasions how much it's hurt them that they haven't had Ryan Ellis, who he views as their best transitional defenseman. It's not a coincidence that they lose Matt Niskanen, who was very good at that. They tried to replace him essentially with Phil Myers, who wasn't as good at that and then regressed in that area. And then they threw in Eric Gustafsson, who was more of a stretch pass guy, less of a, make the good, smart, 10-foot pass. He was always looking for the home run. So they didn't have that transition game that they had in the second half of 2019-2020. And because of that, they didn't have the same speed through the middle of the ice. Their forecheck didn't have as much bite. And it just, the whole system kind of was falling apart. And once that happens, then the players lose faith in it. And then you're doubly screwed, because even the parts of it that would have worked if the trust was there aren't working anymore because the players don't believe it's going to work. And once you've lost the players, you're done. And I think that's more or less what happened to Vigneault.
Yeah, and the psychology of it too. Players know that if they make a mistake or it doesn't work, like that 2-1-2 offensive zone forecheck, it can be beat with one pass. And when it is, they've got numbers going the other way. And when every time it doesn't work, you're pulling it out of the back of your net. Like you cannot play this game, afraid that you're going to give up a goal, or you are totally screwed. And I think we saw that. Like, you could see it, and you can almost see players thinking.
Well, that was definitely, in my mind, the case last year. You know,
Yeah, I
and
agree. I
part of that
concur.
was the goaltending. You know,
Yep.
there was definitely a feeling on the part of the players that if we make one mistake, it's going to end up in the back of their net. That said, not absolving the players, because I think part the reason why the goaltending fell apart is because the players were enmeshed structurally the first 2 months of the year, and that
Yep.
put too much pressure on the goaltending. So like it's all interconnected. You know, goaltending, skaters, forwards, defensemen, systems. You know, it's all kind of a Jenga tower, and if you pull off enough bricks, the whole thing is going to fall apart. And that's more or less in my mind what happened in Philly. It just there was too much damage done last season, too much trust lost, and then when the losses started piling up this year, it all just came apart.
Yeah, and are you surprised that the goaltending? Well, we're going to refer to Carter Hart because he was the only goaltender that was here last year. Are you surprised it rebounded the way it did this year? I mean, he's had a couple outings that were like, the Vancouver game to start the year, obviously the Tampa game, they were all over him, and he got pulled with 11 minutes left in the second. But for the most part, he's been very good, and his core principles of goaltending, even though the environment hasn't been real good at times this year, he's been really sharp. And the way he's rebounded from a mental standpoint, I think is incredibly impressive.
Yeah, I'll be totally honest with you. I'm not surprised, but I'm not surprised because of how highly I view Carter Hart. You
Yeah.
know, I really viewed last season as kind of a perfect storm aberration where everything went bad at the same time. You know, you're talking about technique, you're talking about, mental state, you're talking about the unique nature of living in isolation in a pandemic. You're talking about the brutal schedule, which didn't give him a chance to reset. I just thought last season was, a year that probably in normal circumstances would have just been a whatever down season for Carter Hart. You know, maybe he finishes with like a 905 save percentage, and we're like, yeah, Carter Hart needs to be a bit better next year.
Yep.
Instead, the circumstances turned that into a disaster. And I never thought he was going to replicate that. And I believe that over the summer, he was going to, go home. He was going to work on his craft. He was going to get his head right. And he was going to come back the same goalie that Flyers fans saw, in 2019, 2020, and in the bubble against Montreal and New York. And that's really the goalie we've seen. In fact, at times, I think he's looked even better. I think that, setting aside those couple rough games, and I'm going to kind of give him a pass for that Tampa game because, that was a team that was waiting on its coach to get fired. So I'm, that was a unique set of circumstances. To me, like Hart at times has looked like he's taken a further step, not just from last year, which was easy to do. Well, maybe not easy, but it wasn't going to be hard to be better than he was last year. But he looks to me at times even better than he looked, in his breakout season in 2019, 2020, and in that playoff run. He looks more confident handling the puck. His reads look better. He just seems like he's even more controlled than he was in the past. And I'm far from a goalie expert, but, to me, Hart has, obviously been very, very good. But it seems like not only has he, arrested the potential slide that could have started with last season, but he's actually improving on his foundational game, beyond just getting back to where he was before.
Yeah, I remember the game against Carolina that they won 2-1. I thought it was I went back and watched every save of that game. He was spectacular in that game. That's that glove save he had on Aho in the third. Like the snap and like the attitude. Like you could feel his confidence. You can see it the way he moves and the way he's making saves and his explosive. I think he's stronger down low. I think he looks like a better goalie overall too, because I think he went back to some of his core principles this offseason. I know that Kim Dillabaugh, the Flyers goalie coach, went up to Edmonton this summer to work out with him and Dustin Schwartz, who was his goalie coach back home, and they really kind of attacked some of the core philosophies of his game. And it's not so much like trying to add things and change Carter, but let's accentuate the great elements: play reading, positioning, efficiency. I think we're seeing all that this year, and that's a huge element. Charlie, when they consider a next coach, whether it's Mike Yeo, whether it's somebody from the outside, whether it's Rick Tocchet or John Tortorella or David Quinn or Jim Montgomery, somebody else, maybe even Travis Green, who knows? They have to consider the element of the goaltender and not putting him in a position to get damaged again.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you certainly don't want to have Carter Hart or any goalie really having to deal with what what they dealt with last season, particularly over the first stretch when
Yeah.
structurally the Flyers were a total disaster. Some of that's personnel too. That's on the GM to make sure that the defense is better. And I'm not just talking about defensemen. I'm talking about team defense. I'm talking about, having guys who, will be committed to two-way play and will be committed to going back and helping your goalie and not, leaving them hung out to dry. So there's that. The coaching question is fascinating to me because, to me, you mentioned that they absolutely have to take into account, protecting your goalie and not leaving, someone like Carter Hart out to make 40 saves a night, 45 saves a night just to protect his team. I think a lot of this coaching decision has to really revolve around what they're going to be doing, like what their plan is as an organization.
Totally agree.
Like for example, John Tortorella's name obviously has been thrown out. He's a big name coach. He succeeded in the past. John Tortorella is not the kind of coach that you hire if the Flyers,
if you're going youth movement, you don't.
Yeah, if you're going youth movement, you don't do. If you're going rebuild, you don't do that.
No, he's not a developer.
So it doesn't make much sense to me to go out and hire a John Tortorella unless you fully committed to the idea of we are still a win now team. The first 2 months of this year was a fluke, whatever. But I think there hard questions are going to have to be asked if the Flyers miss the playoffs again, because then you're in a situation where 3 out of the last 4 seasons have been disastrous for this team. I mean, you had the 2018-2019 season where Hextall and Haxall were fired. You had the 2019-2020 season, which was objectively good. You had last season, which was a disaster. And then you have this season, which at least to this point has been a disaster. And teams that have 3 out of 4 seasons that are disastrous probably shouldn't be trying to win now. So the Flyers really, in terms of what their decision is with regards to their next coach, they need to take a good hard look in the mirror and figure out what they are. And that has to guide who their next coach is. Because I would be fine with hiring a Rick Tocchet if you're going to do a youth movement. I think he'd be fine for that. I think he's a smart hockey mind who connects well with his players, and that works. But if you're trying to win now, he's a risk because you really don't know if he's a championship caliber coach. You hope he is. You hope you're getting a championship caliber coach, but the fact is he hasn't done it before, so you don't know. Whereas if you hire a John Tortorella, he's a championship caliber coach, but you better be sure that you're giving him a championship caliber team.
Yeah, because he's a guy that's going to get everything out of what he has. But, the interest, I think that I totally agree with you that they have to figure out, you don't have to figure it out right now.
No, not right now.
Fans want to rush, right? We live in this microwave society where we pop a thing in the microwave and in 60 seconds it's ready to eat. Sometimes it doesn't taste so good when you do that, though. So, this notion of, even before AV was fired, they need to do something now. No, you don't need to do something now. You need to ask the right questions, be honest in your assessment, an internal assessment, and make the right decisions, not the quick decisions. So they have time to figure that out. But let's talk about the notion of getting back into it this year. The 3 straight wins, Montreal tonight, Ottawa Saturday, that could put them in a much better position. They're not that far out of it. Detroit is actually a wild card team right now. They have games in hand on them. A couple teams to jump. Boston's one of them. New Jersey, or Columbus rather, another. But, with, 57 games left on this schedule, there's a lot of runway here. Top 3 spots in the Metro, I think the math is too hard there. But wild card's not out of the equation. But they got to get their game in order to really do it and get consistent and get guys back healthy.
Yeah, there is a path. There is a path to getting back in this. Obviously, it's centered around winning a lot of games. That's the essential part. But, as we talked about, the goaltending has been good to great. I mean, Martin Jones has been perfectly fine as a backup, and Carter Hart has been very good as the lead guy. So you have that foundation there. If you can fix the structural play, they cannot be what they were at the end of that 10-game losing streak. I mean, they were, if you're looking at underlying numbers, I mean, they were collecting about 44% of the shot attempts at 5-on-5 and about 45% of the expected goals. And I don't care how good your goaltending is, that's not going to cut it. No one can survive that degree of territorial disadvantage. Now, if you can get that up to 51, 52%, with the good goaltending and have the power play chip in with some goals here and there, then you have something. And then it's just a matter of, can you get guys like Ryan Ellis back? Can Kevin Hayes get back to, reasonably close to what he was before the 2 surgeries this season? Can Wade Allison come up and provide the kind of, physical spark that he looked like he was going to be able to provide all year before he unfortunately had the high ankle sprain? You have a path with continued good goaltending, with better structural play driven by the coaching change and by guys getting back from injury, you have a pathway to having a very strong second half. Now you have to go out there and do it. And that's going to be on the players and the coaching staff and the goaltending to continue their strong play and whatnot. But like, it's not out of the realm of possibility. There is a plausible path to it. It's just that doesn't make it any easier. They still dug themselves a really deep hole, and it's not going to be easy to win, 65% of their games the rest of the way.
Yeah, and there's going to be guys that aren't injured that have to get their game back. Sean Couturier is a guy, I think he was dealing with something because he just didn't look like himself. In the last couple of games, I've seen a lot more controlling the 200 by 85 from Couturier than we did prior. But like guys like Ivan Provorov's got to get his game back. Let's talk about Provorov because Charlie, there's points in games where some of his decision making has been really poor. I look at the Makar goal and I go, why did he go right when he had coverage on that side and he gave up the entire left side? Makar's right on that rush opportunity. There's been decision making. There's confidence issues. He's got to get his game back, or I don't care if you have Ryan Ellis back or not. They got to be better.
Yeah, he's been rough, especially over the last month or so. Kind of in tandem with as the team started to fall apart. Provy's interesting because my view of him is that it's very clear he's at his best when he's with a stable, reliable partner, but not just a stable, reliable partner, but a guy who can kind of do it all. And like, I have the utmost respect for Justin Braun and what he brings to the table. But the fact of the matter is that ideally he's a third pair NHL defenseman at this stage of his career. He's not a top pair guy, and they're just kind of stuck. They have to use him like that. And I think for a while, because I thought Provorov, he didn't score much in the beginning of the year, but I thought he was playing well. I thought he was playing confident. I thought he was making good passes. And I really liked the developing chemistry between him and Ellis. And then when Ellis went down, I thought he kind of carried that over for a few more weeks. Even without Ellis, I thought Provorov was driving the Braun Provorov pairing, as he should, considering he's the more talented player, and he was still looking good. And then his game started to, bad habits started to creep in. The problems with puck handling started to return that were all over the place last year. And the decision making without the puck, I think, is truthfully one of my biggest concerns about him. Like, I can't tell you how many times over the last month I've seen like a loose puck in the neutral zone where it's one of those plays where, Provorov, it's a 50-50 play where Provorov could either skate forward and trust that he's going to win the race of that puck, get the puck and send the Flyers back up ice, or back off and let the other guy get it and just give him easy entry into the zone. And every single time he's backing off. That tells me a guy doesn't have confidence, that he lacks confidence both in his teammates and in himself. And he needs to get that back. If he doesn't get that back, the Flyers are going to have a glaring hole on that top pair. And like, I think the Sanheim-Ristolainen second pair has been fine. And maybe if you get Ryan Ellis back, that will give Provorov his confidence back because he'll just have a better partner next to him. But ideally, you don't have to wait for that because truthfully, like, look, the Flyers have expressed confidence that Ryan Ellis is going to be back this year. They believe he'll be back. But given the way his season's gone, I think it's completely fair to take an I'll believe it when I see it type of route in terms of understanding Ryan Ellis's chances of coming back and being an impact player for this team this year. So you can't pin your hopes on, well, Ellis will fix Provorov. No, Provorov has to fix himself. And then if he gets Ellis back, that's just an added bonus.
Yeah. Provorov at this point shouldn't be so partner reliant.
Yeah, I agree with that.
It's, Niskanen, it was a great tandem. With Ellis, the 4 games they played, it was a good tandem. But again, I totally agree with you that, putting your hopes on the season in the Ryan Ellis coming back and staying available for the rest of the season is a very tenuous basket to put your eggs in. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So let's talk about Giroux because he's a player, Charlie, that tries to drag his team to victory as much as he can. He's been their most consistent player. He hasn't been perfect. Nobody has for this team this year. But are you surprised as he's knocking on the door here at 34 that he's still, the other night against the Devils, and okay, it was the Devils, I don't care, but he made some passes in that game that I'm going, there is no erosion in his playmaking ability at all at 33 years of age.
No, and those are the types of things, vision, passing ability that probably, they probably aren't going to be affected by aging the way that skating, the way that, physical ability is going to be. He still thinks the game, and he's, look, he'll be 60 years old playing in an alumni game, and he'll still be making those passes because that's just Claude Giroux. Like, you don't lose that. But Does it surprise me that he's been able to adapt his game to, his physical limitations that come when you're in your mid-30s? Yeah, it surprised me that he's been able to do it this well.
Yeah.
He's turned himself from, what he was in his early to mid-20s, which was pretty much an all-offense guy. And you could do it because he was so talented and could pretty much do whatever he wanted and could just control the game by always having the puck in the offensive zone. And I think over the last few years, he's kind of come to the conclusion, in addition to the fact that he's played more wing, but he's playing center now and he's still looking good. I think he's just kind of came to the conclusion that he's got to pick his spots a little bit more. He's got to play a little smarter, not necessarily play a conservative game, but he's just got to be, he can't take the same risks he took in the past. And in a sense, it's helping him continue to put up kind of similar numbers, really, aside from the power play, kind of similar numbers, because I think because he's a more controlled player and because the hockey IQ is still there, the Flyers just have the puck a lot when he's on the ice, regardless of who he's with. And because of that, you're still a great passer, you're still a great playmaker. You're going to have even more opportunities to score because you're not playing the same, exciting trade chances kind of game that he could play when he was 23, 24. I give him a lot of credit for, kind of looking in the mirror, having an understanding of what his newfound strengths and weaknesses, his new weaknesses are, and adapting his play to make it so those weaknesses don't stop him from being a high-end player, because I still believe he is absolutely a high-end player in this league. And that's credit to his ability, his humility, and his ability to understand, this is what I can still do. This is what I can't still do. Let me play to those strengths and make sure that I stay very good because I'm taking advantage when I'm still really, really good at it.
Yeah, it is amazing. You're right. And he's a guy that the compete level too is just something that I think a lot of people don't really see with him that is there. I mean, he's a guy that, if you played ping pong with him, he would want to assassinate you. That's just the way he is. It's the way he's wired. Let me ask you about what he accomplished in regards to power play points, because he's the organization's all-time leader now in power play points. He since 2010, 2011 season, he's got the most power play points in the NHL. And let's face it, Charlie, he's not feeding a guy named Ovechkin. He's not handing it off to a line A. He's not, he hasn't had a pure scorer with him on these power plays. And frankly, the Flyers power play, for the most part, is at best been kind of mid NHL level for a lot of his career. But yet he's got this huge number of points. Can you put that into perspective where kind of he stands as a power play player? Can you imagine if he had a line A or somebody like that, a trigger man?
Yeah, look what he did for guys like Scott Hartnell and Braden Shen,
Yeah.
as those shooters. And look, I'm not taking anything away from those guys, but they're not Patrick Laine types.
No.
They're not traditional snipers. And he was just feeding them perfect passes and letting them blast away and score 30 goals a year.
Wayne Simmons.
Yeah, Wayne Simmons. I'll give Wayne Simmons was a fantastic net front guy, and he would have been a fantastic net front guy regardless of where he played. So, but yeah, having somebody like Giroux to feed him down low certainly didn't hurt. Certainly helped his numbers. I can tell you that. The power play, especially prime age Giroux, the power play was just the perfect showcase for his talent, for his vision, for his IQ, for his way to kind of see 3 steps ahead of the play. He could figure out where the puck was going to end up, 3 players before he was going to touch the puck. He just knew. He has that innate ability. And when you're surrounded with guys who are also good playmakers, like he was with guys like Voracek and, obviously, Ghost was, a dynamic power play player for quite a while. Simmons opened things up by being just an incredible net front guy, opens things up for everybody because you got to have somebody on him at all times. So the power play, it's funny you talk about the power play, about it being mediocre for a while. Obviously it was really good in the beginning. Of Giroux's time. And then there was like a 3-year stretch where it was middle of the road league wise. But if you looked at it, the top unit was one of the best units in hockey. It was just that the second unit never scored.
Yeah.
So it kind of dragged down the efficiency of the team. But if you looked at it, like the Flyers' top unit was as good as any top unit in hockey.
Yeah.
Then after the Therrien hire, really it was the year before. It was the final year of Knobloch when the power play really started to fall off from a top unit standpoint. And I don't think they've really figured it out since. Now, whether they can find a coach, whether it's, Darryl Williams is running the power play now, whether they go outside at some point, whether they can find a coach who can unlock that, I don't know. But I would say that, Giroux's units, power play units, were elite for most of the 2010s. I mean, because he was just that good of a distributor, that good of a quarterback.
Yeah, he's so patient on it too. Like the game slows down for him. You're right. He's like he's playing chess when everybody else is playing checkers. Yeah. He's like a grandmaster chess champion. But Bobby Fischer. Look at me pulling that one out. Or Kasparov.
There you go.
The Russian guy.
Yeah.
I love chess, by the way. Let me ask you about Rasmus Ristolainen, because obviously that was a very polarizing acquisition this summer. What Chuck gave up, including that number 1 pick and Robert Haig and everything else. And he comes in a second pairing role to play alongside Travis Sanheim. There's been some real big kind of ugly hiccups. Like I look back at that Pittsburgh game in particular, and the first goal that they scored like 17 seconds in, I'm going, where is he at? Where did he go? And there's those moments, but there's those other moments of, physicality, and we're starting to see a little bit of the playmaking abilities that he has as well. The 2-on-1 breakup he had at the end of the first period against the Devils. He's making some plays. He's gaining confidence. What have you seen from him, both from your eye test and the analytics?
Yeah, I think the big thing with Ristolainen this year is kind of it took time. The beginning of the year, I thought he was really rough. It was clearly an adjustment. He was learning a new team, learning a new partner, learning new systems. And then around maybe the early part of November, it really seemed to click for him, and he rattled off a bunch of really good games in a row. Then the whole team kind of fell apart. So it was hard to be like, well, he's playing great. I think he was playing okay. But the whole team was playing poorly. So it was kind of like he was playing okay relative to the fact that the rest of the team was a total dumpster fire. And yeah, he had a really good game against the Devils. I thought he was, one of the best players on the Flyers in that game. I think he's been fine. I think on the whole, right, his role essentially, obviously with Ryan Ellis, it's gotten pushed up a little bit because Ellis is out, but his role is essentially to be a number 4. He's the number 4 on the depth chart ideally, and I think he's performed like a solid number 4. You look at his analytics, they're not amazing, but they're better than they were in Buffalo. And in truth, that was expected. You should have expected that you drop a guy down in terms of difficulty of usage, his numbers are going to get better. He's more or less, if you look at his analytics, he's more or less a break-even impact guy in terms of his impact at 5-on-5. And really, for a number 4, that's fine. That's more or less number 4. You're expecting the top half of your defense core to be the drivers, the middle guys to be kind of, they provide that stabilizing presence. They don't hurt you, and they provide some help from game to game. And then the bottom guys, you're hoping you in sheltered minutes, they'll be okay. Ristolainen, I think, and the thing too is with somebody like him, you have to account. I'm obviously, a pretty analytics oriented guy, but you have to account for the intangible element that he brings. And if someone like him is grading out as break even by analytics, you kind of got to give him another little boost, because I do believe that physical presence does provide a cumulative effect to the entire team over the course of a game, both in terms of, making other teams less willing to go into the corners against him and against the team as a whole. And then also just the way it fires up the team on the bench. So, if a guy like Ristolainen is achieving break even, analytics, and then also providing those things that are a bit tougher to measure because they kind of have an impact across the team as a whole rather than just on his numbers, then you have to say he's doing a pretty good job. And I think he's done that. I don't think he's been incredible, but I think he's been good and he's been fine. And in truth, I was worried this could be a total disaster, and it hasn't been. And, score one for Chuck Fletcher, because in this role, it looks like Ristolainen can certainly hold his own. And, there weren't a lot of right-handed shots, especially guys with physicality out on the market last year. So he got one, and Ristolainen's holding his own, and we'll see if over the second half of the year that continues. But I haven't seen much to tell me that the floor is about to fall out from under him. It seems like he's got a pretty good handle on what he is and what his role is with this team.
And it'll be interesting to see where the Flyers are, because he's on an expiring contract. So is Giroux. And if they're in a situation where they're not going to be a playoff team, there's 2 pieces right there that could be very attractive on expiring deals. A guy like Giroux to a team like Colorado, or Ristolainen is a guy that can play on a third pair on a team trying to load up and bring that. We know that physical part is big in the playoffs, right? You see these teams all adding that for playoff pushes. Maybe you could even recoup that first round pick for a guy like Ristolainen. Maybe if he's going to be a third pair, maybe not, but you get something for him. So we'll see if they end up re-signing him or not. Last thing, Charlie, tonight it's Montreal. Do the Flyers come away with another 2 points in the standings, presuming they're going to play the game?
Yeah. I was going to say, like, I'll give my prediction operating under the assumption that no one gets pulled 5 minutes into the game and they don't end up having to play with, 9 forwards. I think they win this game. I think they're playing well. And I think Montreal is just such a mess right now that this is a game where, you should win this game. Ottawa, honestly, is a game I'd be a little bit more worried about just because they're feeling pretty good about themselves right now.
They blasted Florida 8-2.
Yeah, and they beat Tampa last weekend. So, I mean,
4-0.
I still think the Flyers are better, but you could see Ottawa, provide more of a challenge. I think Montreal is a team that where they're at right now. I mean, if you want to prove you're the Flyers and you want to prove that you're going the right direction, that you've moved past the 10-game winless streak, you got to win this game. You got to win this game. And I think they will, because I think they're playing well enough. I think the structure's improved. They definitely need to, continue to make strides in that area, but I think it's improved enough to take apart a team like Montreal that is kind of on the ropes right now.
Yeah, and they don't have a Carey Price to save them right now either. Yeah, I really liked what Mike Yeo said the other night after the New Jersey game. He said, we're going to reiterate with the players that the reason why they had this result is because of hard work. So if you start thinking things are fixed and you're not willing to put in the work it took to get that result, then you're going to be right back where you were. I loved that message.
Yeah, and that's the message he has to provide, because it isn't they're not all the way back. There are still issues. There are still mistakes they're making. So they have to. And I mean, in truth, Mike Yeo hasn't even really fully implemented probably all the changes that he wants to implement yet. He's made some tweaks. They're definitely, using shorter passes in the defensive zone. Their breakouts look smoother. There's, a bit more the balance between dump-ins and controlled entries. The risk reward, I think, philosophy is a little bit more skewed towards, hey, try to make plays rather than just dump it in as your first read all the time. So there have been tweaks made, but I'm sure there's bigger structural changes that Yeo wants to make that he hasn't even gotten to yet because they barely practiced. So he wants to make sure the team knows that, like, hey, I've made some changes. We're getting some wins. That's great, but we're not done. And I'm not done in terms of putting my stamp on this team and the style of hockey I want you guys to play. So it goes back to what he said after that, that first game he coached, was go to work and go to school. And they're still in school.
Yeah, I look at it and go, there's no way he can implement all the things. It takes at least a month.
Yeah.
It just does. So we'll see if they get the win tonight. Hey, Charlie, I'm a subscriber to The Athletic. I praise it on social media all the time because of the work that you and so many of the writers there do. I think it's just fantastic content. If people are not a subscriber to The Athletic, pony up, because it is great content. And there is no website that covers this sport better than The Athletic. And this sport, it needs good coverage. And The Athletic has provided from you and Pierre LeBrun, just so many great writers there. And I appreciate you coming on Stick to Hockey Live. And hopefully they get a win tonight. We can continue to ride this because, when they lose, it tends to be your fault, my fault, and everybody that covers the team's fault. But we never seem to get any of the glory. It's never our accomplishment when they do well.
Yeah, it'd be nice to get a pat on the back when the Flyers win a couple of games. Like, good job for asking those questions that got that team to do well.
Yeah, like, hey, they won 3 straight. Good job, Jason. Not, dude, what the hell would you do? It's all your fault. They just blame me. I got the blame on the radio for years. I'm like, what the hell's going on here? That's
because you were the only person on the radio that was talking hockey. You were the only person they could point to.
You make a valid point. Maybe the most valid point of this entire interview. Charlie, thanks for doing this, man. Be well, all right? Have a good holiday.
All right, take care. Thanks, Jason.
There he is, Charlie O'Connor, joining us on this episode of Stick to Hockey Live, presented by Parx, the Parx Sportsbook, and it's just great stuff. And make sure you go to Parx, download the app, and get on Parx. I'm on there right now because I'm looking at this game tonight. So you can see, there's a little bit of a glare. Let me turn my light. Well, that turns it up, so maybe you can see it there. Parx. So easy to use. And I'm on the Flyer Montreal game tonight. So let me give you a couple plays here to put it in on the Parx Sportsbook app where you get a $500 risk-free bet to start. Let's start with game combos. Match the winner and total goals in the game. So you can go Flyers and over 6 at plus 220. I will take it. Flyers are filling it up lately. Flyers and under 6 is plus 200. I'll take the 220 at over 6. Now, the other one I love is goal scorer, player goals, first to score, all of that stuff. How about Cam Atkinson had a hat trick in last game? he's a streaky scorer, plus 1150 to score the first goal in the game, or plus 188 to score. I'll punch a ticket there. I'm going to punch a ticket at plus 200 for Travis Konechny to get a goal. And let's go with a long shot here, too, to score a goal. You want to maybe go like a Zach McEwen at plus 440? That's not bad. I would consider that. It's a long shot. It's just a little light play to put it on there. I'm not going to give you any goal scorers for Le Habitant. Shots on goal, we could go with total shots on goal in the game over 62.5. It's minus 125. Not bad. And period one. The first period for the Flyers has been their best period of the season. If you want to go period one for the Flyers on the money line, it's minus 152. See, Vegas knows. I think I would probably stay away from it because I don't like it's not a great payout. But some stuff you can put on the game tonight. So make sure you download the app, the Parx app. It's simply fantastic. New customers, you get that $500 risk-free bet just for signing up. And you can go to parxcasino.com/PA. Everything's laid out there for you as well. And make sure you follow Parx on Twitter at Parx Sportsbook. Check them out on Instagram. They provide great content there as well, on YouTube and also Facebook. So tons to go with here. I got some questions here on the stream. John says, any futures I like right now? I can look at some of the futures. I know that. Let me look at some of the NHL futures here. Futures. All right. Let's see if we can find a future for you here. Colorado Avalanche to win the cup at plus 550. See, I like that play because Colorado also has cap space, John. So they can add Florida at plus 800. I just don't believe that team's going to win it. Vegas is at plus 750, but I'm not a believer there. To win the Western Conference, Colorado also at plus 2.25. Sometimes that you have to lose to get better. Let me see if there's any. Let's go with some of the trophies. So the Art Ross winner, that's not even worth it. There's too much there. The Maurice Rocket Richard trophy. You can grab Ovechkin at plus 350 to lead the league in goals. The Calder, Zegras not bad there at plus 200. The Norris Makar is the favorite at plus 175, or Adam Fox. I probably wouldn't do that. The Vezina, right now it is Shesterkin at plus 400. Can that sustain? I like Shesterkin a little bit as a light bet, as a futures bet to win the Vezina. So yeah, I would go with that. And John says I locked in Zegras a couple weeks ago for the Colorado. I hope you got good odds on the Parx Sportsbook. So I look, he made that dynamic play on the Sonny Milano goal to kind of Michigan and over the net. But yeah, that's not a bad play. Good on you, John, for putting that one in. We're going to have another new episode for you. Again, Stick to Hockey Live is every Monday and every Thursday at 1 o'clock. We do it live here. Then it's also available on demand on iTunes. It's going to be on Google this week. I know this is already on Google. The OGs podcast is not there yet, but it will be by the end of this week. Spotify, all those different places. Leave us a rating and review. That'll help people find this podcast and get it out there. It's back. It's consistent. The Stick to Hockey podcast took a nice long pause. Still doing Flyers daily, but we're also going to do this twice a week and have these great conversations with people like Charlie. Check out the first 3 episodes. We had Adam Kimmelman on episode number 1 of what we're calling this season 2 of Stick to Hockey Live. On episode 2, we had Brian Boucher, and I love talking to Bouch. Everybody knows that. And then on Monday's episode, go back and check this out too. We talked to Kevin Woodley from InGoalMag.com, and Kevin's the goalie whisperer for Sportsnet in Canada, and he just provides great information and insight on the position of goaltending and by proxy the ability to score goals in the NHL. So it'll give you a lot of info there as well. And Kevin will be joining us from time to time, and we'll have another brand new episode coming up on Monday for you at 1 o'clock. And it's presented by Parx, and everybody should go get the Parx Sportsbook app immediately because it's well worth it, and you'll have some fun doing the live play-by-play betting and in-game betting as well. And also, got to tell people about Wildfire Podcasting because they're our podcast host, and they got a great studio just outside of Philadelphia in Clementon, New Jersey. If you're thinking about a career in sports broadcasting, you want to start a podcast, if you're thinking about for your company doing a podcast, it's a great way to market your business, become known as an expert in your field by putting out podcasts. thousands of listeners. It's a great way to interact with your audience and your customers and your clients. Go to wildfirepodcast.com or email Jim at wfgnj.com. Tell him I sent you, and your first show is free. Again, go to wildfirepodcast.com. They know what they're doing. They do it great. And they host this podcast. They host the OG's podcast. And all of those are presented by the Parx Sportsbook. So that'll put a wrap on this episode. Thanks to Charlie O'Connor for joining us. Thanks for everybody for watching and for listening. We'll have a brand new episode for you coming up on Monday. Have a great couple of days. Enjoy your hockey. And we'll talk to you on the next episode of the Stick to